invite you to continue meditating while I give the Dhamma talk. Meditation is something you do. We don't relax our way to awakening. The Buddha's images of people who practice the Dhamma tend to be soldiers, archers, carpenters, cooks, people trying to succeed in a battle or to succeed in mastering a craft. In the Buddhist terms, we learn about the Dhamma and reach the Dhamma through two factors: commitment and reflection. You work at the skills of the path, you commit yourself to doing the path, and then you reflect on what you're doing and the results you're getting. Not simply to be aware of the results, but to figure out where they're going well and where they're not. Then you make adjustments. You're not expected to know everything beforehand. In fact, the Thai Ajahns are very critical of people who have everything figured out before they start practicing. Ideally, you practice and you learn from what you're doing. Ajahn Lee, among the Thai masters, tends to give examples of people mastering a craft to explain how you meditate. For example, you're trying to learn how to weave a basket. The teacher will teach you the basic steps for weaving the basket. But then whether the basket is going to be beautiful, that depends on you. You try your hand at it, try to be carefully aware of what you're doing, and then you look at the results. And if they're not what you want, then you try to figure out what went wrong, and then you do it again. And then again and again, as you get better and better, observing both what you're doing and the basket, the results, until finally you get a basket that's well made. And if you want to become a professional basket maker, now you have your standard. Now, the qualities that are needed to develop skill like this come in a list that the Buddha calls the 4 bases of success. The Pali term is Iddhipāda. Of his major teachings, and he did list this among his major teachings. This is the one that gets the least attention in the modern world. So I thought it'd be good for our retreat to give us some more attention, so we can pick up some things we might have missed otherwise. The 4 bases for success are concentration based on desire, concentration based on persistence, concentration based on intent, and concentration based on circumspection. Each of these goes together with, the word circumspection, vimarsā, can also mean using your powers of analysis, your powers of judgment, and your ingenuity. In other words, it's the active side of the mind, trying to figure things out. All of these are combined with what are called the fabrications of exertion, sankhara. And we'll talk about sankhara, fabrication, in a minute. But all 4 are necessary for the practice. In other words, when you're doing concentration, you can't have just desire or just persistence. You need all 4: desire, persistence, intent, and your powers of judgment. But different people will emphasize different bases at different times in the practice. Today, I'd like to talk about the first 2, desire and persistence. The Buddha said that all dhammas, all phenomena that you're going to experience are rooted in desire. There's only one thing that's not rooted in desire, and that's nirvana. But the path taking you there has to start with desire. So even though we've heard many times that the Buddha says desire is the cause of suffering, he also says that it's an important part of the path that comes under right effort. And it's the quality in which the path is going to take place. If you don't have the desire to do the practice, it's not going to happen on its own. Venerable Nanda gave a good image for this. A Brahmin came to see him one time and asked him, this path that you practice, what's the goal? And Nanda said, well, one of the goals is to put an end to desire. And the Brahmin asked, well, how do you do that? And Nanda responded with a list of the 4 bases of success. And when he got to concentration based on desire, the Brahmin says, well, that's impossible. How can you use desire to put an end to desire? And then I said, well, you came here to this park where I'm staying right now, right? Yes. And before you came here, did you have a desire to come here? Yes. If I didn't have the desire, I wouldn't be here. But now that you've come here, where's that desire? Well, it's gone. You use the desire and then you put it aside. This is how we practice. Your desire gets in the way of the practice only when you focus on the results you want without focusing on the causes that are going to get you there. So the desire has to focus on what will get me there to where I want to go. So you look at the causes for concentration. The Buddha lists 3. There's mindfulness, which is your ability to keep something in mind. Like right now, you're trying to keep the breath in mind. Alertness, watching what you're doing and the results that you're getting. So you're watching the breath as it comes in. You know when it's coming in. You know when it's going out. And you know whether or not it's comfortable. You know whether or not your mind is staying. And then the third quality is ardency. You try to do this well. In other words, if the mind wanders off, you don't just simply watch it wander off. You try to bring it back. While you're with the breath, you try to breathe in ways that feel really good. So you can capture the mind's attention, keep it here. So you have these three things, and you focus on these three things: being mindful, being alert, and being ardent. That will get you into concentration. You don't get into jhana, thinking about jhana. You actually develop the qualities that will get you there. So we're focusing on the breath. We're here not to get the breath, but we're going to use the breath to get to the mind. You focus on the breath, not for its own sake, but for it will take you. So the beginning, to have desire, you have to talk yourself into wanting to be with the breath. Remind yourself the breath here is the basic force of life. And if the force of life feels good, it's going to be good for the body, it's going to be good for the mind. If you leave the breath without paying much attention to it, it'll just come in, go out, and do nothing more than keep you alive. But if you focus attention on it, it can be good for the health of the body, good for the health of the mind. It provides a really good place for the mind to settle down in the present moment. When you're with the breath, you know you're in the present moment. There's no future breath you can watch, no past breath you can watch. There's only the breath in the present. Now, this way of talking to yourself comes under what the Buddha calls the three types of fabrication. This is going to be necessary for all the different types of bases of success. So it's good that you remember these. First one is bodily fabrication, which is the in and out breath. The second is verbal fabrication. That's the way you talk to yourself. The Buddha analyzes into two terms. One is directed thought, when you direct your thoughts to a particular topic. And then evaluation, where you evaluate it. You make comments on it. You ask questions about what you're thinking about. And if you combine this with ardency, you talk to yourself about how to make it better, how to make it more interesting. Finally, there's mental fabrication, which are perceptions and feelings. Perceptions are the images you hold in mind. They can either be pictures that you hold in mind, or individual words that you hold in mind. Like right now, you have the perception of breath. You may have an image of how the breath flows in the body. That would count as a mental fabrication. And then the feelings, the feeling tones that you develop through the way you breathe. It can either be comfortable or uncomfortable. Right now, we're trying to create a sense of comfort so that it feels good to be here. It feels refreshing to breathe in, refreshing to breathe out. It's good to focus your attention mainly on the breathing in. Let the body do the breathing out on its own. Don't force the breath out. That way the breath doesn't become squeezed. It becomes more and more pleasant to stay here. There's a sense of the breath energy fills the body and stays here, even as you breathe out. Good breath energy stays, the bad breath energy goes out. You get feelings like this, okay, then that's going to have an impact on the mind. The mind will settle down, be willing to stay here, and be trying to jump away all the time. So once you've talked yourself into wanting to stay with the breath, then you talk to yourself about the breath itself. You also look at your perceptions of the breath. When you talk about the breath, you talk about how to get it comfortable, how to spread that sense of comfort through the body. So you feel a sense of ease going through the body as you breathe in, breathe out. If there are any pains in the body, that sense of ease will permeate around and through those pains. So even though there may be pains here and there, by and large, the general sense of the body is good. Same time, you want to spread your awareness to fill the body as well. So you're aware of the whole body breathing in, the whole body breathing out. So you can talk to yourself about these things, whether it's working, whether it's not, where there are patterns of tension in different parts of the body. You can make a survey where it seems that the breath is not flowing well. And then what you can do to think of the breath going through those patterns of tension. This is where you bring in the mental fabrication of your perceptions. Remember, the breath is energy. It can permeate everything. In areas where it seems to be blocked, it's usually the blood that's blocked. If you think of the breath going through, think of the atoms being mainly space. It's very easy for the breath to get through them, no matter what the blockage may be. If you have that perception in mind, it's a lot easier to get that sense of the breath to flow everywhere in the body. Now, as the mind settles in, you're going to find that your perception of the breath is going to change. In the beginning, you have a sense of the breath coming in from the outside. As you allow the breath to come in, to give you nourishment. But as the mind begins to settle down, you have a greater sense of the breath originating inside the body. In other words, the breath is not the air coming in and going out. The breath is the movement of energy that allows the air to come in and go out. And that energy starts in the body. So you may want to check, where does it seem to start as you breathe in? It may seem to start in one place, or two or three. And as the mind settles in even more deeply, you begin to get a sense that it starts everywhere. Every cell of the body is, and your awareness begins to get diffuse throughout the body as you, every cell breathing in, every cell breathing out, all in unison. If you hold that perception in mind, it allows the mind to settle down, a great sense of well-being in the present moment. You may even get to the sense where the in and out breath stops. And if you can hold that perception in mind, that there is breath energy in the cells, then you would feel that you're in any danger when the breath stops. It feels just natural. It allows you to stay there with a sense of ease and well-being. So you're trying to use these types of fabrication to get yourself into concentration. And also you need at times to remind yourself why you want to be here. At times when the hour seems to be long, you haven't settled quite in right yet, and you have to remind yourself why you want to keep at this. This is where you can think about different ways of generating desire, again, through directed thought and evaluation, how you talk to yourself. For example, you might think of the Buddhist principle of heedfulness, that what you do does make a difference, and especially what you do with the mind makes a difference. So this is why you want the mind to be trained, because the actions of the mind are going to be shaping your life. And you want to be heedful both of the little dangers that could turn into big dangers, but also the little good things that could turn into big good things. So you may have a little bit of concentration. You may say, well, this doesn't seem very deep, and you throw it away. That's being heedless, because where is deep concentration going to come from? It doesn't come from the little bits and pieces of concentration that you already have. All you have to do is stitch them together. One breath stitches to the next breath, stitches to the next. And over a while, what seems to be shallow concentration begins to get deeper. So don't be heedless of the good things that you already have. At the same time, don't be heedless of little thoughts that come in and eat away at the mind. Say, well, let me think about this a little bit, then I'll get back to the breath. You think about it for a little bit, then it pulls you away. It's like getting on a train and then getting on another train, All of a sudden you find yourself in the middle of Siberia. So don't be heedless of the little good things, and don't be heedless of the little bad things. At the same time, you want to remind yourself you need a place for the mind to settle in, so that you're not totally overcome by the world. As the Buddha said, one of the functions of mindfulness practice to get you into concentration is to put aside greed and distress with reference to the world. If your mind is tied up in the issues of the world all the time, then it's hard to leave, it's hard to have any time for yourself. You also might remind yourself of why the present moment is the place you want to be. This is where you can watch your mind in action, at the same time not getting entangled in the worlds that it creates for itself. When you're in a thought of the past or in the thought of the future, you're in what the Buddha calls becoming. And you're trapped in that state of becoming until it falls apart. But if you stay in the present moment, you can see these thoughts beginning to form into little worlds of thought. You can tell yourself, well, I can watch the process. And as long as I watch the process, then I'm not going to be sucked in. This puts you in a greater position of power. You can decide which thoughts you really need to go with and which ones you can let go. If you don't have a good place to stay in the present moment, it's like standing on the side of a road when you're hot and tired. And someone comes along in an air-conditioned car and they say, hey, hop in, let's go. And you just hop in because it looks like it's a better place than where you are. But you haven't asked, well, who are you? Where are you going? Where are you going to take me? If we lived our lives this way, we'd die. But this is the way we use our minds most of the time. A thought comes in, we don't really think about where it's going to take us. We just go with it because it seems interesting. So what you got to do is you got to build yourself a nice air-conditioned house by the road. So you can be in the air-conditioned house. No matter how hot it is outside, you don't feel any compulsion to jump into every car that comes by. You be a little bit more picky about which ones you want to go with. You ask them where you're going, what can be accomplished, how do we get back here? You're a lot safer. And as you're looking at the breath, remember you're looking at a mirror for the mind, of the different properties of the body. This is the one that's most responsive to the little things going on in the mind. Sometimes you see a catch in the breath before you notice that there's a thought of greed, a thought of anger, a thought of fear coming into the mind. This acts as a warning. And finally, to generate desire to stay here, you have to keep reminding yourself, this is something you can do. As the Buddha said, if it were not possible for human beings to change their ways, to drop unskillful habits and develop skillful habits, he wouldn't have taught. And if they didn't benefit by doing that, he wouldn't have taught that either. So he's basically saying he has faith in you as a person. You can do this. You can change your habits. It simply requires that you learn how to look at what you're doing and be a little bit more discerning in how to figure out what you're doing wrong and how you can do it right. And you read about the great giants and say, oh, they seem so far away from me. I'm not anywhere near where they were. Well, where did they start out? They didn't start out as great giants. They started out as regular people. Simply, they realized that they were suffering and they wanted to put an end to their suffering. Here, the Buddha had offered a way. And so by following the way, step by step by step, they changed themselves. They became the kind of people who could get to the end of the path. So it's the path that's going to develop you. If you can imagine yourself right now at the end of the path, well, it's not going to be you right now. It's going to be the you that you become as you develop the qualities of the path. So these are various ways in which you can generate desire to stick with this and get the mind to settle down, to want to settle down here by focusing his desire on the causes, being mindful, being alert, and being ardent in doing this well. Remember, desire doesn't have to get in the way of the practice. Sometimes you hear that your desire for awakening is the one thing that's getting in the way of your awakening. That's not the case. It gets in the way only if you just sit there with the desire and not do anything about it. Once you have the desire, then you say, okay, I'll focus this desire on the causes, step by step by step, and it'll take me where I want to go. In fact, desire is needed. You need to train your desire in order to practice. Think about the Buddha himself. He had to train his desire. He had this desire when he started out. I want the deathless. I want to find the deathless. And then he tried many, many different ways. The ways the different teachers at the time taught. He tried and undergoing austerities on his own. And it's through trial and error that he finally found the way. But his desire is what kept him going. So do what you can to generate the desire you need in order to stick with this. Partly through taking an interest in the breath, partly through reminding yourself that even on times when things are not working very well, you don't get where you want to go by giving up. You get where you want to go by looking at what you're doing and trying to figure out, well, what went wrong and trying something new. And this is something we can all do. We've all developed skills of one sort or another in the past. It's simply now a matter of learning how to develop the skills in the mind. So that's desire as a basis for success. The second basis is persistence. This is the energy and the perseverance that you put into the path. It's, as the Buddha said, it's through effort that suffering is overcome. Again, he never talked about relaxing your way into Nirvana. He did say that there are some people for whom the practice is easy. But the people for whom the practice is easy, those are the ones that the Buddha taught back in his day. The rest of us now have to struggle on our own. So remember that you are responsible for how this is going to happen. The path does not happen on its own. There's a wrong view that says that you can't tell yourself that you are the one doing the path. That for somehow that's going to get in the way. It doesn't get in the way. Because after all, you're the one who's making the decisions. If you don't want this, it's not going to happen. If you don't put in the effort, it's not going to happen. Think about the Buddha's instructions to his son, Rahula. He said, before you act into an action, you ask yourself, this action that I am going to do, what are the results going to be? If you foresee harm, then you don't do it. If you don't foresee any harm, then you go ahead and do it. While you're doing it, you ask yourself, this action that I am doing, what are the results coming out right now? If there's any harm happening, you stop. If you don't see any harm, you continue. When you're done, you ask yourself, this action that I have done, what were the results? And if you see that there's any harm, you talk it over with someone else who's more advanced in the path. Make up your mind not to repeat that mistake. If you didn't cause any harm, you take joy in the fact that you're progressing on the path. You keep on training. But in every case, it's I am doing this, I am doing that. You are responsible for doing this. So when you're persistent, you're taking on responsibility. Also remember that this is not a non-dual path. Remember, not suffering is better than suffering, so you have to work on the causes for not suffering. But again, you learn this by doing. It's not through just brute effort. It requires discernment. When John Lee was talking about the different factors that give rise to mindfulness and concentration, mindfulness, alertness, and ardency, he listed ardency, the desire to do this well, as the discernment factor. After all, mindfulness can be aware of anything, good or bad. Alertness can be aware of anything, good or bad. It's ardency that wants to do this well. And that's where the discernment lies. Now, the Buddha said there are 4 kinds of persistence or 4 kinds of effort that you're going to put into this. One is preventing. In other words, you want to make sure that unskillful thoughts, unskillful qualities don't arise in the mind. The second one is abandoning. If they do arise, you let go. The third is giving rise. In other words, if skillful qualities are not there yet, you figure out how to give rise to them. If you're lacking in mindfulness, lacking in ardency, lacking in alertness, think about how to give rise to them. And once they're there, you maintain them and develop them. You don't just simply watch them arise and pass away. You try to make them arise and keep them from passing away. This is the right effort. Now, the discernment will also have to determine the amount of energy you put into this. You may know the story of Venerable Sona. He'd been very delicately brought up. In fact, so delicately brought up that he had hair on the palms of his hands and the soles of his feet. And it's a long story about why he decided to ordain. He becomes a monk. And one day he's doing walking meditation, and his feet are beginning to bleed. And he's getting discouraged. He said, I put in all this effort and I haven't gotten where I need to go, where I want to go. He's thinking of disrobing. The Buddha notices this. The Buddha is far away on Vulture Peak. So he disappears from Vulture Peak, reappears in front of Venerable Sona. You can imagine how Venerable Sona felt. Suppose you're sitting here nodding off, and all of a sudden the Buddha appears in front of you and says, are you nodding off? Are you thinking of quitting? So he asked the Buddha, are you thinking of disrobing? And Sona says, yes. And the Buddha said, well, when you were a layperson, were you skilled at playing the lute? Yes. When the lute was tuned too tight, did it sound good? No. When it's tuned too loosely, did it sound good? No. Said in the same way, you tune your level of energy to what you're capable of. And then to that, you tune your conviction, your mindfulness, your concentration, and discernment. And then you pick up the theme of your music and you play. You're talking about what are called the 5 faculties. And the image is of tuning a lute that has 5 strings. You probably know when you tune a guitar, you tune 1 string and then you tune the other remaining strings to that first string. So the first string that you tune is your level of energy. How much energy do you have now? If you're coming back from a long day at work, that's not the time to say, I'm not going to get up from my meditation until I've achieved the supreme awakening. Basically telling yourself, I'm going to try to get through the hour, not fall asleep. But on days when you do have energy, you don't want to be lazy. Say, I've got the energy today, I've got to put it in. I don't know how much more time I'll have this energy, so I should devote it to what I can do right now. And finally, the amount of energy is also going to depend on the particular task at hand. As the Buddha himself said, there are some causes of suffering that will go away when you just simply look at them. The reason they're there is because you haven't paid careful attention. You pay careful attention and you see that, oh, this is not right. You let them go. Others, you look at them and they look right back. They're not going to go anywhere very easily. That's where you have to use those 3 kinds of fabrication again. Look at the way you're breathing. Look at the way You're talking to yourself about this, and then look at the perception that you're holding in mind. Tomorrow, I want to go into a little bit more detail on this, and how you use these three kinds of fabrication to take apart an unskillful mental attitude to see what is the allure of this unskillful attitude. Why do I like it? You may tell yourself, I don't like it, I don't like it, I don't like it, but part of you must. Otherwise, your mind wouldn't go for it. And so you learn how to breathe in new ways, talk to yourself in new ways, use different perceptions and feelings to get yourself past that, whatever that stubborn defilement is in the mind. So as Ajaan Phra used to say, you can't force your way into Nirvana simply through brute effort. You have to use some discernment in your effort. As you also notice, you also have to develop along with letting go. All too often we hear that it's just a practice of letting go, letting go, letting go. The Buddha never said that. He always said the letting go has to be paired with developing. You've got to develop good qualities in the mind. So you can hold on to some things before you let them go. You can't just let go all at once. Ajahn Chah has the image of coming back from the market. You've got a banana in your hand. Someone comes up and asks you, that banana you've got in your hand, what are you going to do with it? You say, I'm going to eat it. Are you going to eat the peel too? No. Then why are you carrying the peel? And Ajahn Chah says, what are you going to answer him? And as he says, his answer to that question comes in two levels. One is you answer out of desire. If you don't have the desire, you're not going to come up with a good answer. And secondly, of course, the good answer is it's not time to let go of the peel yet. If I let go of the peel now, the banana will turn into mush. When I eat the banana, then I throw away the peel. So there's certain things you have to hold on to as you practice. Those are the things you develop. Ajahn Mahabuddha's images of climbing a ladder up to a roof. You don't just let go of the ladder. You hold on to one rung, and then you hold on to the next rung, and then you let go of the first one to hold on to one higher than that. Then you let go of the second one to hold on to one higher than that. And that way, the practice is both one of letting go and developing, letting go and developing, until finally you get up on the roof. So here again, think of the directed and thought and evaluation that you put into your concentration. You have to, this is the beginning of discernment here as you're trying to figure out how to make the breath comfortable, how to make the mind willing to stay with the breath. What perceptions are useful for getting the mind to settle down with the breath. And as you develop these good qualities, okay, they will take you to where you want to go. So the persistence here, of course, is right persistence. It's combined with discernment. It's simply a matter of learning how to apply the right effort at any one particular time. And finally, of course, there's the issue of sitting here with a comfortable breath. How do you not fall asleep? Where you learn how to take an interest in what's going on, take an interest in the mind, take an interest in keeping your awareness, filling the body, adjusting the breath, using the breath to work through pains in the different parts of the body, work through tension, work through problems with your posture. So lots of things you can do here. And as you experiment like this, you develop your discernment. And so in this way, these two qualities, desire and persistence, work together to take you to the spot where you want to go. Those are the thoughts I'd like to discuss. Well, talk to you this morning about desire and persistence. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the remaining two bases of success. This is the time now for questions.
Thank you, Thanajan. Okay, so I'll read out the questions for today. We have about 12 questions. Some questions are quite long, so I'll just read a summarized version of it. But Thanajan has read the entire question. First question from Leah Navim from USA. I did a self-retreat for 2 weeks, practicing your method of breathing through the whole body in a spirit of creativity and inquiry, transferring pleasant breath sensations to painful parts of the body and so forth. On some occasions, I felt like I had strong samadhi, example, mind being very still, and even sometimes effervescent piti from the waist up, despite experiencing a lot of pain in the leg and my knees. So one thing I discovered was that in the past, even though there's localized pain, it doesn't occur where it is, but it has a global effect of exhausting the whole body after a while. When I sit for long periods of time, I feel the exhaustion and constraint of being with the pain, exhorting me to change posture before the intensity of the pain itself did. So in a given sitting, when I reach my limit of using the breath to manipulate pain to a tolerable level, as you teach, I've explored pain and observed the mental responses to it and perceptions of it. How do you suggest continuing to sit with pain? What inner activities can I do vis-a-vis the pain when I'm hurting myself in vain and when I'm losing out?
Okay, there are two things here. One is that after you've been using the breath in order to help alleviate the pain, alleviate the tension around the pain, when your concentration is strong enough, you can start just looking at the pain directly and asking yourself questions about your perceptions around the pain. In other words, do you perceive the pain as the same thing as the body? Or is the body and the pain two separate things? It's like radio waves in the air. You can put your radio in one place and you can get the different stations from different places without moving the radio around. It's right there. But you begin to realize, okay, the one frequency will give you Los Angeles, another frequency will give you San Diego. In the same way, the pain and the body may seem to be in the same place, but they're different frequencies. Can you perceive that? The pain is one thing, and the elements of the body, earth, water, wind, fire, those are something else. The second question you can ask is, do you perceive the pain as a solid block or as individual moments of pain? Try to see it as individual moments. And when you see that they are individual moments, try to see them as going away, rather than coming at you. One time when I was in Singapore, Keng took me down to a doctor to treat my back. And the doctor rubbed oil into my back. And then he took these bamboo whisks and started beating me. And I told myself, oh my gosh, what karma have I done in order to get this to happen to me? But I didn't want to be a wimpy Westerner, so I put up with it. And then I began to realize that each time the pain hit, I could perceive it as going away from me and not coming at me. And that way it made it a lot easier to be with the pain, and yet the mind was not disturbed by the pain. So those are the kinds of questions you want to ask, is how am I perceiving this pain in such a way that it does make it feel like it's spreading through the body? It's causing exhaustion throughout the body. Can I change the way I perceive the relationship between the body, the pain, and my awareness? Those three things: body, pain, awareness. See them as separate. And whatever perception helps you see them as separate. And as I say, see the pain as going away, that's very helpful. The other thing is, if you really do feel exhausted, though, that's the time to rest. Change your posture, get up, move around. Because it does take a fair amount of energy in order to analyze the pain and analyze the mind's relationship to the pain. When you're feeling exhausted, it's not going to happen. But push yourself a little bit first to look into the perceptions around the pain to see if those can help. Make it a lot easier to sit with the pain and not feel like it's overcoming you. Next.
Okay. So the next question is from Sanjay in Australia. Dear Thanissaro, please give me advice on what is the best way to switch our mind state to a better one. For example, when the mind is controlled by anger or negative feeling, and for no obvious reasons, it can last for quite some time. So the reasoning does not work. And so I try to reason it on my own, it doesn't work because there's no obvious reason for it that I can find. And when I try to do the mantra recitation, Bhutto, it makes the mind more tired to be mindful of the feeling, but it makes the feelings more intense. Thank you.
Okay, you try to analyze that feeling into those three kinds of fabrication that I mentioned just now. Bodily fabrication, how are you breathing? Verbal fabrication, what is the mind telling to itself that makes the feeling stay? And then 3, mental fabrication, what are the perceptions you have around this? So one thing you might want to do is just say, I'm just going to change the way I breathe in a way that's more energizing. to get me out of the negative mind state. And then you can start asking questions of this mind state. Say, what is the perception here that makes part of my mind want to go for this state? Every negative mind, every positive mind state will have something that's called the allure. In other words, what you like about it. And if you don't know what the allure is, like you say, it seems to be there for no reason at all. It's probably the mind is lying to you. It doesn't want to admit why you're there with that mind state. So you have to be stubborn. It's like, I'm just going to keep on breathing it in a more energizing way to get myself energized. I don't want to wallow in this negative mind state. And see if there's part of the mind that complains, wants to be in that negative mind state. Then you can figure out, okay, what its reasons are. If it's going to be stubborn, you have to be stubborn too. Yes.
Okay. Next question from Julia from Sweden. Verbal fabrication falls away for 20 minutes to an hour, accompanied by a sense of unification. Is verbal fabrication falling away a sure sign of second jhana? Much like the breath stopping is a sure sign of the fourth jhana.
Okay, I would say use a post-it note. Say this seems to be the second jhana, but as I get to know my mind better, maybe I'll see that there's a little bit of verbal fabrication going on there that I didn't see before. But in the meantime, put a post-it note and say, okay, this is Julia's second jhana, or my second jhana. And then as you get to know the different stages that the mind goes through in concentration, after a while, then you may have to rearrange the notes. But be content with the post-it notes to begin with.
So the next question is from Julene from Singapore. I conceive my mental committee as comprising 40 members of voices. I read your translation of Ajahn Lee's take on consciousness, and now I identify the voice of whether it's good and true to be myself or my real self that is to be trusted. This trustworthy self is now appointed as the chairperson in this mental committee, but it's not powerful enough to rule and it gets overpowered by other consciousness. And I make some wrong decisions unknowingly. Can Ajahn advise on how I might better strengthen or empower the trustworthy self, or get rid of the multitude of other voices? Thank you.
Okay, the problem is your unskillful committee members are very tricky. And your skillful committee chairman is very honest and straightforward. And you have to train your committee chairman to be a little bit tricky too. If they're going to be stubborn, okay, you can be stubborn too. And again, just learning how to analyze these voices in terms of those three fabrications will be very easy, very, very helpful. In other words, when a particular voice comes up, how do you breathe? What is it saying? What are the perceptions that are going through your mind as that voice comes in and tries to take over? Because sometimes a committee member will come in and will take over your breath and say, if you don't, I'm not going to go away and I'm going to hold your breath hostage until you do what I want. You say, well, no, you take the breath back and say, no, I'm going to breathe in the way that I think it feels best for the body right now. I'm going to try to change the perceptions that I'm holding on to right now. So learn how to use this analysis of the three kinds of fabrication to help you take apart those unskillful voices, so you can see through them and so they lose some of their power.
Next question. One of the writings, the next question is from Julene from Singapore as well. One of your writings recommended choosing a meditation approach or subject suited for individual temperament. I now believe that practicing is more important than theory, and doing one thing at a time with focus is better than multitasking. But I have difficulties overcoming my well-honed overthinking capacities, as I intended to be more intellectual or theoretically inclined and take more pride in multitasking skills. Could Ajahn advise, example, on a more suitable meditation approach or subject for my type of temperament?
I think working with the breath and learning how to work with the breath energies in the body will make the breath interesting. Someone who has an intellectual or likes to think a lot will get the mind into concentration only with an object that is interesting, that intrigues them, that captures their imagination. Like Bhutto will not cut it. It's just, it's not interesting enough. So this is what's called gaining concentration through intent, through your powers of judgment, which we'll be talking about tomorrow. But in the meantime, the breath, you can analyze the breath as it goes through the different ways in the body, how you're breathing, where does the breath start? If I have any patterns of tension associated with any illnesses in my body, how can I breathe in such a way that will help cure those illnesses? There are lots of things that you can think about, lots of questions you can pose in the mind. And when you get interested in a topic like this, then the topic will pull you in, and you don't have to think about forcing yourself to stay there. It's more that you stay there out of interest.
Next question is from Reji Varghese from India. Is Goenka Vipassana a good technique to follow as one's main meditation practice?
I would recommend following the Buddha's technique as your main meditation practice. Look at the Buddha's 16 steps for breath meditation. And you also want to have leeway so that you have your main practice, which the Buddha says, as you work with the breath, you're going to be learning about the body, you're going to be learning about feelings, you're going to be learning about the mind, you're going to be learning about the processes of fabrication. There was one time when he told the monks, the monks should practice breath meditation. And one monk said, well, I do that. And the Buddha said, well, how do you practice breath meditation? He says, well, I'm just there with my breath as it comes in, goes out, and I try to put aside thoughts of the future, put aside thoughts of the past, and thoughts of liking and disliking the present moment, and just be there with the breath. The Buddha said, okay, there is that kind of breath meditation, but it doesn't get the same results as doing the 16 steps that the Buddha outlined. So I'd recommend you look into the Buddha's analysis of the 16 steps. I wrote a book on the topic called Right Mindfulness. There's a whole section on the Anapanasati Sutta in there, which talks about how to put those 16 steps into practice. I would recommend that as your main focus.
The next question from Joshua Tan from Malaysia. Dear Bhante, I would like to clarify my understanding of Dhammapada verse 124. If there's no wound on the hand, one may handle poison. Poison does not affect one who has no wound, and there can be no evil for one who has no evil intention. This story relates to the wife of a hunter, Kuku Tamita. She prepares hunting tools for her husband, but does not create any bad karma herself. Is this applicable to us in our daily job? For example, selling something according to our boss's sales script, even though we may not agree with it. Thank you.
Okay. You have to be careful about the commentary. The stories that come with the Dhammapada were not stories that date from the canon. Those are stories that come in the commentary, and they're not always all that reliable. If your boss's sales pitch contains lies, okay, and you repeat those lies, it's still going to be your karma. So you got to be careful.
Thanks, Ajahn. Okay, the next question is from Ray from Singapore. Dear Ajahn, how can I practice on behalf of my grandmother who is going through old age, illness, and possibly death? She is 91 years of age. She gets tired easily and sleeps a lot in front of the TV. She is being cared at home from my parents, and I know I cannot force my grandma to chant or meditate, as she has no interest. Last week, my 15-year-old pet dog passed away peacefully with the aid of a vet because my body's dog is too weary to continue and his body cannot walk anymore. My question is, I would like to know how I can practice spiritually so this mind can be solid, compassionate, and real, so that I can dedicate guaranteed merits to help loved ones when they are passing on. Please help share some light. Thank you.
Okay, guaranteed merits. Okay, you're the one who has to guarantee them. I would recommend practicing the complete list of generosity, virtue, meditation, getting the mind into good solid concentration and developing discernment, and then dedicating the merit of all of that to your grandmother. Now, the grandmother's going to get this merit. So I suppose she gets this after she dies. She's going to have to approve of what you're doing and give her approval. If she doesn't approve of it, she's not going to get the merit from it. So at least try to talk her into such a way. Say, Grandma, if you ever find out that I'm dedicating merit to you, please approve it. In the meantime, you're going to be the one who has to guarantee the quality of your merit through being generally generous, and try to develop generosity as a skill. Don't just go through the motions. Try to figure out what ways can you help the people who really are deserving of help. Give your energy, it doesn't have to be material things. It can be your energy, give your knowledge. So you feel really good about what you're doing. It's not just a mechanical kind of thing. It's when you feel genuinely good about the way you're being generous, genuinely good about the way you're practicing the precepts, genuinely good about your meditation. That's genuine merit. But then again, make sure that grandma is in the right state of mind that she'll be willing to accept that. There was a man I knew in Bangkok who lived in a condominium which had built over where there used to be an old Christian cemetery, and people in the condominium would occasionally see spirits inhabiting the apartments. And so one time he was meditating, and he had this vision of a Catholic nun standing in his living room. So he dedicated the merit of his meditation to her, and she's, I don't want your Buddhist merit. So she didn't get any. So make sure grandma has a good attitude towards merit.
Next question is from Michael from Australia. It's regarding a paragraph from Majjhima Nikaya 311. So this sutta describes how Venerable Sariputta experienced each jhana. Could Ajahn Thanissaro please elaborate a bit more about this and how Venerable Sariputta or the meditator would be able to see and understand these states in each jhana?
Okay, when you're using jhana as a basis for discernment, you have to pull out a little bit. The image that I like to use is of your hand being in a glove. When the hand is fully in the glove, that represents just really being in that state of jhana. And the mind is very still. There's not a lot of analysis going on. There's not a lot of thinking going on. But if you can pull out a little bit, and then you can kind of look at what's going on and see how the mind is fabricating that state of jhana. That's when you begin to see those individual qualities that are going into it. The Buddha himself gives an analogy. He says it's like a person sitting and then another person standing, looking at the person sitting, or the person sitting looking at a person lying down. So you pull out a little bit, but not totally out. And that's when you're sort of a little bit out that you can start seeing, okay, this is how the mind engages in a feeling. This is how the mind engages in a perception, and so on. So, but that you can do that only after you've really solidly been in the state of concentration. Don't try to analyze it too quickly.
And the next question is from Kim Fang from Malaysia. Whenever the thought of my past comes up, there is a lot of guilt and regret, which I didn't have previously. So I'm not sure if this is because I'm able to see that I was wrong, or something in me finally accepted that I'm wrong, or I'm not sure if it's something else. So I get scared of this emotion and always run away from it. I stop meditating because I feel like it's pulling me in like quicksand 99% of the time, and only 1% of the time I feel strong enough to face it and not be affected. So I feel stuck in this pattern. How do I move forward with my practice when fear of these emotions are so strong? Thank you.
You have to remember that all human beings have unskillful karma in their past. You're not the only one. And as the Buddha said, the best response to that is one, to admit that yes, it was a mistake, and to realize the best thing you can do, you can't go back to unmake the mistake, but you can develop all the Brahma Viharas, thoughts of goodwill, thoughts of compassion, thoughts of empathetic joy, thoughts of equanimity, and extend them to the person you harmed, to yourself, and then to all living beings. And you remember that we're all in this, and we've all done unskillful things in the past. We've all done harmful things in the past. And that takes a lot of the sting away. So it's not just you who's done that horrible thing. That everybody else has done bad things in the past. But if you can develop the Brahma Viharas, that helps lift the state of your mind. Think of all beings suffering, and okay, you have compassion for them, you have goodwill for them, but then realize, okay, everybody depends on their karma. If I let myself get sucked down by that regret from the past, it's going to be hard for me to do good things in the present moment. So I have to learn how to let that go and then move forward.
So maybe the last question for this morning.
Okay.
From Lee Song Heng from Malaysia. How do I practice walking meditation?
Okay, walking meditation is very similar to sitting meditation. You're going to be staying with the breath if you can. If you can't stay with the breath, then you can make your focus on the movement of the feet. But you set up a path. The path should be at least 20 paces long. If it's shorter than that, you get dizzy. And you start at this end, and then you walk along, and then you get to the other end and ask yourself, okay, is my mind with my body right now? If it's not, bring it back to the body. Then you turn around, and then you walk back in the other direction. Try to walk at a normal pace, because what you're trying to do is get used to maintaining your object of concentration while you move in a normal way throughout the day. Because then you want to be able to extend this ability to other chores around the house, as you drive, as you go on the mass transit, as you go to work. But ideally, if you can, try to stay with the breath. It's good to stay with the breath energy focused someplace in the middle of the body, either at the nose or at the middle of the chest. And try to maintain your awareness there. Think of it being open and comfortable. So it feels good to be here walking, and you walk with ease, coming back, going forth, going back, going forth. So you try to maintain that still center in the midst of the movement of the body, so that you can then kind of carry that skill into your other activities.